Are you the one? There are almost 8 billion people in the world, but are you the one that needs hope? In this very moment, there are 332 million people in the US, but are you the one that feels alone? Good news is, you're not alone. While 80,000 thoughts will bombard you today and can feel chaotic, just one thought can potentially bring you peace and free you. Join us today, together with our guests, as we sift through the challenges, pains, questions, and victories in life. In sharing our stories, are you the one that will be inspired to take the next step toward fully living the purposeful and abundant life God created for you? Welcome to Are You the One?
Welcome back to Are You the One? My name is Trish, and I am so thankful that you are on the journey with us through the messiness of life and the victories of life. And last week, we had part one of my guest, Jamie, who spent like the great part of her life as a child in brokenness and shared that journey with us. We talked all the way through. I encourage you, if you did not hear it, you need to go back and listen to it, watch it, because if you are a parent, if you're a child, you're probably not listening to this unless you're maybe like 11 or 12 or older. But if you're a parent, I really encourage you, because there are many like really good things that came out of that in terms of the things that draw our kids into addiction. And so I encourage you to go back. But today we're going to fast forward to like the second half of your life, which is the life that began at 25. You mentioned this last week. And at 25, when you began the real journey of recovery. So reintroduce yourself for a moment, Jamie, and then take it from there.
Okay, I'm Jamie. Happy to be here again. So I touched briefly and mentioned that I had been in and out of recovery, and I like to think of age 25 as really being the turning point for where I really my life was one way and then it wasn't anymore. So I am not a person that has the experience of coming to recovery one time and having it stick. Mine is more of an evolution. I had mentioned briefly I went to treatment the first time at 17 by a vehicle of the courts. I did not want to be sober, and so I that was very short-lived. I ended up, though, and I did mention this also, that in my naive 17-year-old brain, that I thought that addiction was like a choice, and that I just didn't have anything at that point of my life that really made me want to stop. And that once that came, that I would just be able to turn the switch off. That was not my experience. And I became pregnant with my son when I was 17 years old. I ended up having him when I was 18. And I had no recovery in me. I had been estranged from my mom. I had to go to that treatment center. It was in Las Vegas. My dad had me live with him and put me in an outpatient center in Vegas. And then my son's dad was in prison, and at the time I was waiting for him to get out, and when he got out I got pregnant, and we were doing drugs together. I was a big fan of methamphetamine, and I didn't know I was pregnant for several months, and I knew nothing of the disease of alcoholism. I talked a lot about my younger life, and a lot of my journey and just lack of knowing. I blamed a lot. I was like the ultimate victim, and I got a lot of mileage out of that. And I did have valid and legitimate brokenness in me, but I didn't have the tools to do anything, like to utilize anything in my life as leverage to take me to the next step. So all I could do was just obsess about all the things that were wrong and how I had been wronged. And so when I got pregnant with my son, I had another really ridiculous, naive thought, which was that this is the thing. This is the thing that's going to fix me. And my family, in all of their, shortcomings, I've got some wonderful, wonderful, supportive people in my family. My grandmother has always been super supportive, and my great grandparents, and I think that they were they weren't thrilled that I was pregnant, but they'd seen what I'd gone through, and I think maybe that they were hopeful too, that maybe this was it. Maybe this was the thing. I don't recall anybody saying that I shouldn't have the baby. I think that everybody kind of knew my mind was pretty made up. And
thank you, God.
And I do have experience becoming pregnant even earlier in my life, and terminating that pregnancy. And so maybe that also played into the decision. That was a very difficult thing for me to walk through. I was 15 at that time. So I had my son, and I mostly was able to stay sober. And I say mostly. I had no car. I had no phone. I had no job. I had no life skills. I had no education. All I did was go home to my mom because, the dad and I didn't work out, and went home to my mom. And I thought that sobriety meant I had to lock myself up away from people, places, and things. Didn't do any work on myself. I remember my dad, and so diplomatically asked me, well, do you think maybe, and it was the day that I brought my son home from the hospital, and he said, do you think maybe you might want to go to AA? And I was like, no. Why would I do that? I'm a mom now. Like, this is it. Like, I'm never going to use drugs again. And the thing is that's so crazy is that I'm just going to be completely transparent. So I said mostly sober in my pregnancy. I think that I had my first experience of powerlessness while I was pregnant, even though I had been experiencing it for many years, but I had no idea that that's what it was. And so when I was pregnant with my son, I found out I was pregnant when I was about 3 months pregnant. And like I said, I'm locking myself up at my mom's house. And I remember I was like, I'm just going to go hang out with some friends and, like show everybody how great I'm doing. And ended up in a hotel. And I remember this so clearly. It was like, I made this decision to have my son, and I wanted him more than anything. And I wanted to be a mother, and I had all of these dreams and hopes and plans for how I was going to be different than, my mom, because of course, like my teenage thinking was that if my mom loved me more, then she would, and that's so not true. That is not how addiction works. If that was how addiction worked, none of us would be where we are.
There would be no generational things, right?
No. Mm-hmm. So, needless to say, it was like almost like an out of body experience. It was all of a sudden I was like watching these people around me getting high, and all of a sudden I started having these thoughts like, you don't really want this baby. You're still early enough in your pregnancy, you can terminate. It's not that big of a deal. Like all of the things, right? And in my recovery program, I've learned now that all of the things, all of the promises, all of the swearing off, and all of the the my literature says the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago are not enough. I can't bring that into my brain and use that as a means to not use. I pick up, I will use again. And that is powerlessness, pregnant or not. I was using drugs knowingly pregnant and for days. And I came home with the most remorse that I have ever felt in my entire life and the most shame I have ever felt. And I wanted to kill myself. And I thought, I cannot believe I did this. Am I a crazy person? What is wrong with me? Who would do something like this? And fast forward, I had him, he was fine. I had a few more of those experiences, and I remember thinking and swearing off, I would never do it again. And there I was again, a few months later, and I was like, so it was like me hanging on. That's what I thought recovery, or that's what I thought, I guess that's what I thought not using drugs was just I had to hold on to a table and hope and pray to God that I wasn't going to use, and somehow or another, it just seemed to always happen to me, right? Because I'm a victim, and I don't understand how any of this is happening to me, and it's really simple. It happened to me because I'm a drug addict, and without a solution, I get high. That's what I do, and I remember years later, so I ended up in treatment again at 20. My son was 2. I went into a wonderful treatment center. And of course, I had a problem with it because it was faith-based. Well, slightly. I mean, it was 12-step, but there was it had a Christian undertone. Mm-hmm. And my lovely Christian grandmother said that she would only send me to treatment if it was a Christian treatment center. And I was like, F that, I'm not going. I'm not going to have that shoved down my throat. Because I had all this bargaining, right? In my...
Right.
Yeah. So I went. It was 30 days. In my opinion, not long enough for anybody, but that's another subject. And I go into the women's house that was connected to the treatment center. I lived there for 2 months, and I go home to move in with my grandmother. And my lovely codependent grandma, her and I, thick as thieves. Just by the way, every good drug addict and alcoholic cannot exist without a really, really good codependent in their life. I think it was hilarious because there was this family day, and the guy who actually runs PALS was a counselor at the rehab that I went to prior to PALS ever being a thing. And he was the one speaking to the family on family day saying, don't give them money and give them responsibility. And my grandma left and actually went to the bank during this whole thing to go deposit money into my account. And then moved me in and gave me a weekly allowance. And the only responsibility I had was to basically babysit my own child and go to meetings. And somehow even I think that lasted 10 months. I went to some meetings. I did some whatever. And I didn't step back into the doors of recovery until I was 25. I had a lengthy...
Are you listening, parents?
Yeah.
And grandparents.
Yeah. I went into lots of different programs after that too. And I always had I can't go into this treatment center. I've got $10,000 worth of fines for my aggravated DUIs. And, and a big part of my story is this. I had mentioned methamphetamine being a thing. Opiates became a thing. I found that doing meth wasn't so conducive to parenting. But so rather than being sober, I started to drink alcohol, and then lo and behold, found that alcohol was this thing that seemed to always the alcohol bone was connected to the meth bone. And then one day I got introduced, which I had been introduced previously to heroin when I was 14, back in the late 90s. Didn't really grab me much at that time. But it grabbed me again in the early 2000s. And from the time I was about 19 until I was 25, I had a very lengthy relationship with and meth, of course, too, but mostly opiates and alcohol for many, many years. And it took me to some of the darkest places I've never been in my life. And because of the physical component, I then found myself floundering in and out, in and out, in and out of hospitals and things like that. And so I also started, I got DUIs, and so I would make these bargains. Like I would go into these places if, you got to pay my fine. So how can I like mentally cope, with like these looming things? And it's like, I was not coping or dealing with anything prior to that. So I'm pretty sure that I could have sat in a 6-month program without having paid my fines. And, because at the end of the day, if somebody wants to be sober, they're going to be sober whether or not somebody pays a fine for them, whether or not their family's there or not there. And one of the things, if I had to go back, I'd say that, there wasn't as many resources available when I was struggling so young as there are today. And I think that everybody did the best they could with the limited resources that they had. And so I would say that if you are a parent that's struggling with this, there is no shortage of things to seek support for yourself and seek information and to try to understand alcoholism is as best as you can, because understanding that will then inform how you deal with it. I think because of my generational brokenness in my own family, they were just dealing with it the way that the previous generation knew how to deal with it. And it's not wrong or bad. It just is what it is. So,
So at 25, you willingly jump into recovery.
So at 25, I went into sober living. At this point, my grandmother had I willingly gave my son to my grandma, and it ended up being a whole lengthy court thing after, but she ended up having grandparents' rights. I lost my rights, and so did his father. And I'm living in this halfway house, and my grandmother started to go to PALS. And so she started to say things like, I'm not going to, she had like rehearsed statements, and it drove me up a wall. And the thing is that I had requirements. Like I had to pull hair follicle samples in order to see my son. I had a full year of supervised visitation. I could not even drive alone in the car with my son. I couldn't take him to the store alone. I was only allowed to see him 2 days a week, and it had to be during scheduled times. And the thing is I was so angry at my grandmother and because that's just where I was. I could not see that I put myself in this situation. I placed this 70-something-year-old woman who was a great grandmother to my son to be a full-time mother. And my son was not easy at this. I mean, he had a lot of emotional issues. It wasn't an easy journey for her. And I had no empathy, compassion, or self-awareness, completely delusional about the part that I played and the role that I assigned her. And so I think back, and it makes me cringe to think about the yelling that I would scream at her for not giving me what I wanted. I'm a 25-year-old woman at this point in a child's body, adult body, child brain, and I'm acting like a spoiled teenager because she's enforcing rules that I don't want. And then because she's now taking instruction from these dumb PALS people, she's really not. So she cut me off, and I go to this sober living, and I had no money. So the requirement is that you have to test clean to get in. You have to have 2 weeks of rent, and I could not put together 24 hours, and I didn't have any money, and I didn't have a job. So I called the person that I know that always says yes, and she actually said no, click. And I was like, oh, damn. And of course I was angry. So I had this moment though, and I could only, in retrospect, think of this as a divine intervention, because my mom and I have this really, kind of unhealthy relationship. She's got a lot of guilt, right? So I can play her really good. And so she always takes me in, even if I'm doing drugs in her house. And I put this woman who, God, I just terrorized her. And I knew that I could have lived at her house. I knew that I didn't have to go to this sober living. I knew that I could take the easier, softer way and stay at my mom's house.
But not see your son.
But not see my son.
Right.
And I knew all of these things. And I didn't. And I called this halfway house that I'd lived at. This would have been time number 3. And I told them exactly where I was, what I was doing, and this very, very kind man that was running the facility at the time said, "Look, just come to the Sunday speaker meeting at 6:00. I want to see you there." And they let me stay. They took me in with no money. I slept on the floor until I could get a couch, until I could get a bed. I ended up taking a stupid job that I didn't like, but I needed money to pay my rent, and they supplied me with food, and that was where it started. I got a sponsor, and I did what these people asked me to do in a way I'd never ever done before. And it wasn't because I wanted my son back, not that I didn't, but it became because I was convinced that nothing that I could do anymore, like there was no guy that was going to fix it. There was no moving states or cities or getting, nothing of the world. And I didn't have the vernacular to be able to say this at the time, but again, I know it now. Like all I had been doing was seeking temporary fixes, instant gratification in drugs, alcohol, men, you name it. And I had a split second in that decision where I was at my mom's and I had the choice to stay or I could go to that 6 p.m. meeting. And I had a moment where I knew that no matter what I was going to do, that I was going to use regardless of how much I didn't want to. And I remember being in that bathroom and crying and begging God, because I knew I was going to die. And I didn't want my mother to find me like this. And I didn't want my son, but I knew as much as I didn't want those things, that it was going to happen in spite of everything inside of me not wanting it to happen. So I went into this place. I did what these people asked me to do. I was so sad. I was feeling so sorry for myself. And they would say things to me like, they'd watch me crying, walking around the I want to say campus, but it's not a campus, but just walking around the property and crying and, oh my God, I don't know how anything's going to work. My life sucks and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, and they just say, "Hey, why don't you come in the kitchen and help us cut vegetables for dinner tonight? Why don't you go pull the weeds? And why don't you do something to stop thinking about yourself?" And I did not understand what these people were doing or why they were suggesting I would do these stupid things, but I did them. I felt so scared. Really, that's what it was. I was terrified of myself. I didn't trust a single thought in my own head. And I was just willing enough to do what they said, even though it didn't make sense. And that's really where it started. I wish I could say that I've been sober ever since that day, September 5th of 2010. I haven't. I was sober for many years. I've changed my sobriety date twice. That's a whole other thing. I came to understand that for me, given, and this is just my experience, I believe today that if I don't continue to address my the stuff that I address in ACA, the codependence, the unhealthy relationship patterns, those are things that produce a lot of unmanageability in my life. And my solution today is a relationship with God. There's the only thing that I know that's ever worked to arrest my my addiction, that makes me feel whole, that doesn't make me feel like I need to escape myself. And so part of my recovery process is cultivating, nurturing a relationship with God. And I never would have thought that that's what I was coming here to do. I thought that I was going to come here to learn how to not use drugs and just get my kid back, and somehow, I don't even know if I thought so little of myself and my abilities that I couldn't see a month into the future, let alone a year or two. So if I would have been told like my life is gonna look the way that it looks currently today, I would have never believed anybody. But I believe today that the things I do in my recovery journey today are to grow a deeper connection and faith, trust, and reliance upon God. And I can't do that if I am trying to, if I don't have healthy boundaries, if I participate in people pleasing, if I participate in codependence, if I make my husband my higher power, if I, all of the things. And so those unhealthy things and not working on myself, and then also throw in a bunch of life stuff and not doing recovery is a recipe for disaster. And thankfully, my relapse was very brief and pretty benign and minor, but nonetheless it happened, and it pushed me into a deeper, like I say, okay, so AA is kind of like high school, Al-Anon's kind of like college, ACA is kind of like grad school, right? And then this weird thing happened in this last couple year or so, is that it not on my radar, not on anything that I would have ever thought again for myself, as I started going to church, and which has been a whole other weird thing. And I love recovery. It's given me my life. It has changed my life. And even though if you're watching and you've had the experience of relapse, and there's so much shame around that, there's so much misunderstanding, there's so much well, you're not doing something right, and maybe you aren't, maybe whatever, it doesn't even matter. The thing is that my journey started September 5th of 2010. My life has never been the same, even with having changed my sobriety date. I don't get to sit here and say, oh, I've got 14 years sober. No, I don't. However, I have never stopped trying. I've never given up. All of it has been a part of a process. It's been a process for me to understand who I am. It's been a process for me to accept and understand my disease of alcoholism. It's been a process for me to apply recovery and grow and with God, and all of that has been like this huge, long journey, and it hasn't been perfect. It's been really beautiful. It's been really messy at times. It's been perfectly, imperfect, I guess. As cliche as that sounds, but I do believe that for me personally, what I walked through was a necessary thing for me to have to experience, and I'm very grateful. Now, it's taken me a while to say that. I felt very ashamed that somehow I didn't do, AA right, and that's why I relapsed. And it's like, well, it's a little bit more nuanced than that,
yes,
and much more nuanced than that. And the thing is that I think because of my ACA stuff, I have a very black and white, all or nothing thinking, and I've had to learn that so much of self-forgiveness and love is all in the gray areas of life. So much of life is gray. Very little things are black and white. Yeah. And so I've learned, I think in the last couple of years, not just learned, but I've started to really experience self-forgiveness.
It's a miracle when you walk through that.
It's uncomfortable.
It is uncomfortable, but it is also a miracle, because that's when we can embrace, Jesus came, right? He came to set the captives free. Okay. Captive to whatever you can call it. Okay. but he came to give us an abundant life. And until we can set ourselves free, like in other words, Jesus set us free, but accepting that, letting that cloak of shame, I mean, shame is just like one of those things that just like clings to you, and leaving that behind, that's when we walk into a different level of who we've been created to be. Like a different level of what our life here is really about. So you sitting here and giving your testimony as a woman who has walked all these levels, which, by the way, I love the, like, you know, high school, college, grad school, and then, like, you walked in the doors of church. And it's not the church. It's Jesus. It's God. It's like learning that you are more than the sum of what you've done, and you are more than the sum of what's been done to you. Like, you have a divine purpose inside of you and a divine calling on your life. Like, you who are listening to this, I'm talking to you. You have listened for 30 minutes to the second half of Jamie's journey. And I know that there were places inside of this that every single person who's watching this can relate to. But I especially want to bring you to that place of hope as we're getting ready to say goodbye for this day. That place of hope. You know, the Bible says that hope deferred makes the heart sick. So in other words, where you don't have hope, like, that's where you go to that despair. That's where you go to those other places. I've been there in my life. You've been there in your life. And there are people who are watching this right now who may be in that same place. And here's what I'm telling you. There's a day, and this is the day, where God's saying, put your hope in me. Like, one of those steps that Jamie was talking about is the step that you need to take today. Or maybe it's to pick up the phone and call somebody and say, I need help. But today is your day of hope, because this is the day that the Lord has made. And your testimony is rejoicing in it. And I'm just so grateful for you to come and be with us and share, like, just all of the beautiful and broken nuances of your journey. And I know that this is part 2, but I know there'll be a time in the future we're going to call you back and we're going to talk some more about this. So thank you so much for being with me, Jamie. I'm giving you 1 minute to say your message to people.
Okay, so 1 minute. One of the things in my life today, so my husband and I, like I said, we've been married almost 10 years this year. We raised our children together. One of the most important things that's been my life's mission, our life's mission, is that we want to break generational curses.
Yes.
Our children are, my 2 children with my husband have no idea. They know that we go to meetings. They know our, so to speak, our past minimally. They're very stable. They have no idea about the experiences that their older brother, that their lives have not mirrored at all that. They've had the best versions and continue to have better versions of myself and their father. I would say that if you are a parent in recovery, it means more and more to me as I get older and as time goes on. That is the most important thing for me, is to be a healthy mother and a healthy for me, so that I can be a healthy mother, so that I can be a healthy wife, and so that I can transmit my whole self and not my broken self, and that I believe wholeheartedly in restoration. I'm living it. I am not perfect, and I will never stop, because I will always need to keep growing, so that I can, withstand life as it happens, so never stop growing. So many beautiful things happen and are affected by your change in your life. So I hope that's helpful.
I know it is. God bless you. We're looking forward to seeing you next time on Are You the One?
Thank you for listening to Are You the One today. We are grateful that you chose to get into the messiness of life with us. We pray that you have been encouraged and blessed and are ready to perhaps take that next step. Remember, you are not alone. Please visit our website, areyoutheoneshow.com, for resources and reinforcements to help you navigate your way to the heart of God and His great plans for your life. Join us again next week as together we dive into the deep end of life's issues on Are You the One?